Welcome to the Sweepstakes College Baseball Podcast, where we talk everything college baseball from the past week, starting with our player of the week. And this one is coming out of Wake Forest / Tennessee. We have Chase Burns, former Tennessee player, now on Wake after having just an electric performance this past week against very, very highly touted Clemson, going 7 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned run, and 16 strikeouts. The guy's a psycho, and he showed why he's one of the best pitchers in the nation and one of the best prospects out there.
Yeah, I mean, he's just got absolutely elite stuff. Every single pitch is elite, and we've seen the strikeout numbers the whole year, but this was just super impressive performance to do it against that Clemson offense, which has put up double-digit runs on pretty much every team they've played. That's a really impressive offense to do that against.
Yeah, definitely shut down the Clemson offense and pretty much started the whole weekend and able for the entire team to get that sweep there. So started them on a positive note and just kept that momentum going through the entire weekend, where it looks like the pitching staff is looking to finally get things under control and definitely did so this past week. But now moving on to our top play of the week, we'll play that now.
Brown, of course, a native of Macon. Runner in motion. Pitches outside. Lackey's throw is high. Tag laid down. Oh, on the leap, Bichetti got him. How did he make that throw?
So here we had an insane play from Georgia Tech where catcher Vaughn Lackey tries to throw out the runner at second, and the shortstop Mike Bichetti goes between the legs to get the tag. Just insane combination of being able to make that transition for the shortstop there, be able to catch it and then somehow get it tagged down like that.
Yeah, I mean, just super athletic on both ends there. That's a hard throw to make, and yeah, even more impressive on the tag, being able to concentrate up in the air like that, still get the tag down. Super awesome play.
Yeah, for sure. One of the maybe not a spectacular play like we have seen some other weeks, but definitely a highlight play that, wows the people and definitely just something cool to look at. But yeah, going from there, we now have our setback of the week after having, the positives. The big negative this week comes out of East Carolina after going 0-4 the past week, losing a midweek to Duke and then getting swept at Tulane. Really just not the time for it. East Carolina has put together a very, very good season and just got into our top 5 for our rankings. And to have a week like that can be pretty abysmal, but hopefully they're able to turn things around quick because they really need to. And this might have lost them, or definitely lost them, a spot at hosting in the at least top 8. And if they don't have another good week in them, then could drop out of hosting at all. And this was a team that definitely had Omaha aspirations after coming just short so many times, and having a week like this could either really make the team fall apart, but I don't necessarily think that'll happen with this squad. I have a lot of faith in them, so I think this might just bring some more motivation and make them really lock in for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, when you looked at the schedule going into this week, you see a midweek against Duke and then on the road at Tulane. You might think a 2-2 week is in the cards there, and you wouldn't be hugely disappointed, but 0-4 is just a mega disappointment. Wasn't expecting that whatsoever. Tulane's a okay team, not a team you should be getting swept by, though, even on the road. So really tough look there, and like you said, hurts even more because it really looked like they were locking in and, to be in a top 8 seed. If they won these last couple weekends and did okay in their conference tournament, probably would have been locked in, but now they might have some work to do to get back in that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Still on the fringe of being a host. Probably right now they would be, but if they have another bad week in them, could definitely tumble out, and that's not what you want to see, especially with how East Carolina plays at home with the amazing fan base they have. You definitely want them at the back for at least a regional, if not a super regional, but that is still possible if things go their way with seeding and all that kind of upsets. But after that, now we have our series prediction results from the past week, where we chose 5 of the best series, or at least what we thought might be the best series in college baseball, and tried to predict them. once again, I edged out Kevin just a little bit with one more win than loss. We had a lot of the same picks, and just the one we disagreed on, I was able to get over him. So yeah, there were a lot of surprising results. Both of us took Clemson, and that was definitely the wrong decision here. After Wake looks like they might have figured it out. We've seen this a few times where they looks like they have things settled and then really don't show up a weekend. But this one was definitely a performance that can turn the head and make you look and say maybe this Wake Forest team is finally getting back on track to being that like preseason #1 team in the nation. But yeah, a lot of other amazing series. Another one to highlight was that Georgia South Carolina where we both picked wrong again, and it was also a sweep. So a lot of crazy results. Georgia is looking on fire, and one of the best teams in the nation right now.
Yeah, just a messy week there. Two of the series we both agree on the teams get swept, so that's a tough look. And yeah, the Utah Arizona series hurts. I had a feeling Utah would win that Friday game, and they did, but thought they'd be able to pull off one of those last two, and they just couldn't do it. So that one's tough and not helping me with those standings there at all.
Yeah, still have time to make it up with all the postseason and preseason predictions, but yeah, definitely just keep on building one by one at this point on that lead. But now we can get into the main meat of the podcast with our rankings for this week. Decent amount of switch ups, especially in the 5 to 15 range. A lot of movement. But at the top, we still have Tennessee at that #1 spot after a 3-1 week, winning their midweek and then going to Vanderbilt and winning that series. Vanderbilt just, I don't know, can't do anything. I'm a little bit vindicated here after predicting them to be one of the, surprises to be a bad team this year after being predicted for a lot of places to be a good team. Vanderbilt now on the fringe of making the tournament. We'll see if they can pull that out. But Tennessee was able to, continue to get the job done. Unfortunate to not get the sweep. Vanderbilt is finally able to get a win on Tennessee, which they haven't been able to do a lot recently. But yeah, Tennessee is looking like a very solid pick for one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah, Tennessee is playing extremely well. I don't really think there's much separation at the top anymore. I feel like at a lot of points throughout this year, we've said there's separation between the top 2 or 3 teams in the country. I think it's pretty jumbled throughout the top 10 or so now. There's no really solidified #1 team in the country, but Tennessee has been extremely consistent for most of this year and certainly have the talent to be a #1 team. And Vitello's just building a really good program there at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this Tennessee team isn't like that #1 overall Tennessee team we saw a few years back, but they're still a very solid squad. There's just a lot of really good teams, and no team is necessarily perfect right now. There's teams with flaws, unlike what we saw a few years ago with Tennessee, where it just seemed like they were the best offense and pitching. There are definitely some pros and cons in every team in the top 25, and that means in the country. So going from there, we have Kentucky now at 2, moving up 2 spots after going 2-1 at Florida. Good week overall on the road. Very close series, but Kentucky just continues to play their style of ball and get the job done, even though it could have gone either way. They're coming out on top, and very solid win. Florida obviously has the talent. Haven't been able to figure it out this year. Maybe we'll see what happens if they make the tournament or not. I'd leave them out at this point, but Kentucky has continued to prove week in, week out that they are one of the top SEC teams.
Yeah, really impressive series win. I mean, Florida's not a ranked team, like you said, probably not in the tournament right at this moment. They're on the fringe for sure, but that's still a really talented team, a team that was in the title series just a year ago. So it's still an impressive series win for Kentucky, especially on the road. And I watched the Friday game, and I thought that game was a super impressive win for Kentucky. They ran into a lot of outs on the base paths. I think I probably counted at least 5 in the game with just unforced outs there. And that's just the type of style of game they play, though. They're super aggressive on the base paths, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. You try not to be reckless, but they try to be aggressive. And it was one of those games where it seemed like it was turning reckless rather than aggressive, and somehow they still pulled out the win. So I was impressed with that.
Yeah, definitely need to maybe tone it down a little bit, but still getting the win. So doesn't hurt them in the end there. But now moving to number 3, we have Arkansas going up 3 spots from last week. This is where everything really just gets jumbled. A lot of teams did all right the past few weeks, and so moving up and down and all over the place. And Arkansas just so happens to land back up in the top 3 here after going 2-1 versus Mississippi State, which could be a top 10 team depending on how you look at things. But yeah, really, really solid series win here, getting back on track. Still, the pitching hasn't looked great outside of Hagen Smith. Definitely, when at the beginning of the season we thought this is by far the best starting pitching rotation in the nation, especially after Wake Forest had their struggles the first few weeks. It's definitely, I don't know, it's not really looking like that right now. It's seeming like it's Hagen Smith and everybody else. But I still trust their arms in the long run. I think they'll be able to settle down, and they have the experience, so definitely will be boosted in the postseason most likely.
Yeah, I think this was a really pivotal series win for them. If they lost this series, it could have been one of those things where you see the season kind of spiral. Not really that they would have been in too much trouble. They still would have been in hosting position, but I think they would have been lacking some confidence as the team's been sputtering a bit recently. They were down 6-0 in that Sunday game, came all the way back to win, and I think that's just huge for the mentality of the team and their mindset going into the end of this year. So we'll see if that has an effect and if they're able to kind of go hot, cold, hot, end the year on a good stretch and get ready for the postseason.
Yeah, and it's good to see the offense start to get things going. That's definitely been a concern of ours for a very long time, is that Arkansas offense just has been really, really iffy and just relying on the pitching staff a lot to get wins. And this week, it seemed like more relying on the offense, which was good to see a change in things. And, still going to have Hagen Smith do his thing, but at least they're able to pull out a win when the pitching staff isn't performing up to par. But after that, we have Oregon State now at 4, moving up 5 spots from the past week. I don't necessarily think their jump up 5 spots is that warranted. It's just a result of teams around them not having great weeks, and Oregon State going 4-0, winning their midweek, and then at home against UCLA getting the sweep. So good job overall. Looked dominant besides one of their games. And it seemed like their pitching has started to settle down a little bit more recently. That was our concern for the past few weeks, was the pitching got a little wiry and just relied more on the offense. But this week settled down. UCLA, definitely a team that is not up to where they should be. I had them as the surprise of the year in a good way, and they just are awful. One of, if not the worst team in the Pac-12 this year. So yeah, they got the sweep there, had one close game, but besides that, I don't think it's necessarily that impressive.
Yeah, this Oregon State team's interesting. It's a team that's been ranked pretty high throughout the whole year, but haven't really been tested all that much. At this point, only have 3 Q1 games, and they're 1-2. I think this series down at Arizona this upcoming weekend will say a lot. That's a competitive team, a team that's also in contention to potentially host. So it's a really quality team, and I'm curious to see how they do there. I'm just not fully convinced of Oregon State being quite on the same level as the rest of these top teams, since they haven't really faced that much competition.
Yeah, definitely a concern that they could maybe settle down a bit with the next few weeks with Arizona and then the conference tournament. But definitely need to keep performing well for them to nail down a hosting spot, and who knows, maybe a top 8 if they can really turn things on. But definitely need to get some wins at Arizona to secure a host. But after that, we have Texas A&M at 5, a few weeks after being the number 1 team, drop all the way down to 5 after back-to-back rough weeks. This week losing at Ole Miss, so back-to-back weeks where they lost to SEC teams that necessarily aren't that great. They're good, but they definitely could have done better against some of the mediocre competition. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. They've been crushing all the baseball the entire year and just have hit a little bit of a slump recently. And I think that's just what's happened. They'll get it back. Offenses always tend to, go up and down. And Texas A&M was on the high for a very long time. And these past few weeks, definitely hit a little bit of a bump, but we'll be able to bounce back from what we've seen.
Yeah, it's definitely not the end of the world, but I do think it's concerning that it's been to two mediocre SEC teams, both LSU and Ole Miss, teams on the fringe of making the tournament here, and so they're talented teams, but not really teams you expect Texas A&M to lose to with how well they were playing. So it's a little bit alarming. Certainly not something they can't fix. I think they will be able to turn it around and get things going in the right direction before the postseason, but there's limited time now, so that's the real concerning part there.
Yeah, now at 6, we have the biggest mover for a very long time, with Georgia moving 11 spots, 2 weeks out of not being ranked. They're up to number 6 overall after going to South Carolina and pulling off the sweep. Back to back, really, really impressive weeks. First one was against Vandy, and now South Carolina. They're one of, if not the hottest teams in the nation right now, and the offense is just crushing the baseball. And this is all led by Charlie Condon's record-setting home runs, and he's not the only one that can put up crazy numbers. This offense is ridiculous right now. They kind of took all the juice away from Texas A&M, it seems, and yeah, they're very, very hot and could potentially take the number 1 overall seed if they can keep things going, which is ridiculous considering how far out they were, at least not really considered a top SEC team for a very long time, and for them to just jump into the conversation this quickly is pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely unreal the jump they've made into the top 25, unranked 2 weeks ago for us, now all the way up at 6. It was a team that played well throughout the year, but hadn't really fared too well against top competition yet. Didn't really have those notable series wins, but now they have back to back series sweeps against Vandy, South Carolina. They've scored double digit runs in each of those games. And so just absolutely unreal. The closest game was a 4-run difference, so it's not even competitive either. It's just really impressive the way they're clicking throughout that whole lineup, and they're hot at the right time. And so we'll see how this carries through the rest of the year.
Yeah, and when you look at their overall schedule, all the top SEC teams they played on the road, and they picked off a few wins here or there. So going in, it was very hard to judge where this Georgia team was at, because sure, they were getting wins every now and then against these top teams, but they weren't getting any series wins, just because, I mean, if you look at it, SEC teams on the road just don't really vie very well for the most part, so can't really take too much that can't take too much into like effect with that record. But for Georgia to now get on this streak down the home stretch is super impressive, and finally getting that road series sweep to really top things off. But after that, we have North Carolina at 7, jumping up 5 spots. So pretty big move here. There are now a lot of ACC teams that were about to go on a run here, with all of them seeming like they're in the exact same position. It's just super hard to tell the top of the ACC right now. There's a lot of good teams, but nobody has separated themselves. The teams that did have not played amazing recently. North Carolina, now a team that has been getting pretty hot as of late. Their offense is looking really good, and they've been doing pretty well against decent teams. This past week, they swept Louisville on the road, and yeah, the offense is just really clicking at the moment.
Yeah, I do think this UNC team is the most impressive out of the ACC bunch at this point. They've pretty much solidified that they're going to be the top team in the conference at the end of the regular season. With Clemson getting swept this past week, it was between those two, but now UNC has a 3-game lead, I think. So, unless they have a really rough weekend against Duke here, they're going to win that regular season title. And so they've just been super consistent and have played extremely well throughout the year. And there's a lot of power on that offense, and so they're a dangerous team, and they can definitely hang with anyone.
Yeah, and next up at 8, we have Clemson, dropping back 5 spots from last week after getting swept on the road at Wake Forest. Really rough weekend. The offense really struggled, and it was against a team, this Wake Forest pitching staff, that has been very inconsistent. Maybe they're turning things around right now, but Clemson is an offense that really should be taking advantage of some of those inconsistencies that we have seen with Wake Forest, and they just were not able to do that. Both of us had Clemson winning that series. this past week, and that definitely did not happen. So Clemson dropping back, but I still have faith in this team. I think Clemson is definitely, I feel like the best ACC team still, even though we don't have that in the rankings this week. But from what we've seen for most of the season, they've looked very, very good.
Yeah, definitely one of, if not the best teams in the ACC. And yeah, this was just a surprising weekend. Not shocked that they lost the series on the road, but am surprised at just the way their offense was limited and the fact that they got swept as well. This team just didn't really have the run production and run support that they normally do. Didn't really score that many runs, and the offense wasn't clicking at all. So, I mean, you see that at times with the offense, like we've said, goes through ebbs and flows, but a little bit concerning, especially with the inconsistencies we've seen from the Wake Forest pitching staff. It's the type of staff you kind of think a team like this will expose, and just didn't happen here.
Yeah, for sure. With the amount of like late comebacks that Clemson has had throughout the entire season, this Wake Forest pitching staff is kind of shown that they are susceptible to something like that, and for Clemson to just put up no answer at all is a bit surprising. But moving on to the next ACC team, we have Florida State at number 9 after going 2-2 the past week, losing on the road at Pitt over the weekend. So really bad week against a team that they definitely should be beating. So unfortunate for it to come now. They've put up a really good season overall. Still have faith in this team as well, just like Clemson. But would really like to see them get a series win on the road against a pretty below average ACC team in Pitt.
Yeah, I mean, if they just get any run support on Friday whatsoever, this is a different story of a week. They lose that game 1-0. Jamie Arnold, I think he had 17 strikeouts in that game. So just had the pitching performance of a lifetime just to get the loss, which is incredible there. That's a tough one to swallow for him and for the team in general. So yeah, that's a rough week. Not someone you want to be losing a series to, but not the end of the world. It's just a tough Friday match, and that really set the tone for the series for them.
Yeah, and Arnold had the Player of the Week locked down. Besides the fact that Chase Burns put up pretty much identical numbers and got the win in the game, so that's the only real difference between the two pitchers for those Friday night games. But yeah, just a bit unfortunate for another pitcher to have an insane performance as well over the exact same day. But after that, speaking of Chase Burns, we have Wake Forest at 10, moving up 4 spots from the past week after sweeping Clemson. So really impressive week. Maybe their pitching has finally started to figure it out and play up to their ability. We'll wait and see on that. Still not super sold just because we have talked about Wake the same way throughout the season, where maybe this is the time that they figure it out and then they go on to lose a series the next week. But this would be the perfect time for it, right as you're coming down the home stretch, if they can just nail things in and just tweak the pitching a tiny bit and be able to run off that. And the offense is doing what it should be doing. Just need a little bit of the pitching staff to be as consistent as they were the past week.
Yeah, it's nice to see them turning that corner, but like you said, there's definitely some caution signs of, as we've said that before, and it hasn't really panned out. They're going on the road at NC State this upcoming week, and who knows what's going to happen there. NC State plays extremely well when they're playing tough top teams in the country, and so I think anything can happen in that series, and that's really a toss-up and potentially contention for a hosting spot, potentially a top 8 seed if you're Wake. They're a little higher in the RPI than NC State, but there's definitely implications of that one, so curious to see what happens.
Yep, and speaking of NC State, we have them at 11 right behind them, so this is a very big matchup between the two this coming week. NC State went 3-1 the past week, went to Virginia and won that series. We predicted it. We saw it coming. NC State just plays up to the competition every single time, able to take down, again, another one of the best teams in the country. This time it was on the road. They've got Duke, Clemson, North Carolina, and split the series with Florida State. So that is a crazy resume that they have built up for themselves. And they've proven that they can be one of the best teams in the nation if they're playing one of the best teams, which is interesting to think about considering that their record overall isn't amazing, 29-19. still good, but losing a lot of games to some of the more mediocre competition they've faced.
Yeah, it's crazy to have that much on your resume with that overall record, just not that impressive. But I do think just them playing well against top competition bodes well for them in the postseason. Certainly alarming that they're not, having the consistency across all competition. But once you hit the postseason, you're just playing good teams the whole time. So if they're able to just come up to that level and stay there, they're certainly contenders.
Yeah, definitely. And then at 12, we have the team that NC State beat the past week, with Virginia dropping back 4 spots after going 2-2. Like we mentioned, lost to NC State at home, so not a great week, losing to a ranked a ranked team at home. But really could have been worse. We now know NC State is the giant killer this entire year, so Virginia to just be put on that resume as well. It's not something to look past, but Virginia has put together a really good season. Just a lot of ACC teams right in this same area, so tough to decipher which team is the best, and NC State is the one that's pretty much beaten all of them.
Yeah, it's funny. Going into this past week, we said Virginia was a team that was potentially overranked a little bit, just took advantage of people fluctuating throughout the rankings, and Virginia had just been pretty consistent throughout the whole year. But NC State just went ahead and humbled them there a little bit, brought them back down to life with the rest of the ACC group there. And, not a terrible week overall. Still think the Virginia team is very solid, but just tough when you have NC State, who handles every top team in the conference.
Yeah, definitely. And now finishing off our run of ACC teams, we have Duke at 13, going 2-2 the past week, going to East Carolina, winning that game in the midweek, and then going to Georgia Tech and losing that series. So all in all, not a terrible week. It was against decent competition the entire week, especially East Carolina, that midweek game. So 2-2, maybe not terrible, all on the road as well. So, maybe expected. Maybe shouldn't drop this far. But there's just so many ACC teams that either did really well or didn't do that amazing this past week. Duke on one side of it. So yeah, would have really liked to see that series win against Georgia Tech. Definitely should have, if we want this Duke team to prove that they are one of the best teams in the ACC. There's just a lot of teams right in that pack. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely a tough week. Georgia Tech's pretty solid, a team that we've had on the fringe of our rankings the last couple weeks, but they haven't quite had the overall record or the complete 3-1 weeks. They've been getting those 2-2s instead to haven't been able to jump in the rankings. So that's a team you want to see Duke beat. And Duke now sitting at 20 in the RPI, kind of on the fringe of hosting. Huge series coming up against North Carolina. Big implications there. North Carolina, one of those teams on the fringe of getting a national seed, and so big implications there again. And yeah, there's a lot of things on the line this last week in conference tourney for the ACC.
Yeah, definitely. And now outside of the ACC, after that run of 7 teams straight, we have East Carolina, our biggest loser of the week, dropping back 9 spots to 14 after going 0-4, losing to aforementioned Duke, and then getting swept at Tulane. Really bad week. Really just can't look and can't say much more outside of that. Yeah, no longer will be a top 8 seed, so really disappointing there. Had the opportunity to host a lot of games in the jungle, but unfortunately, we'll see what happens in the postseason. You never know if they're able to secure a super regional with some upsets, but still in that hosting consideration if they're able to turn things around quickly. Think they will, but definitely can't be slipping up on games you definitely should be winning on the weekend, like that sweep against Tulane.
Yeah, just a brutal week overall. Like we said as we covered earlier, looked like they had locked in a top 8 seed. Still not in a terrible spot. Actually, RPI is at 12, so certainly doable, but they're not going to really face any teams that are going to boost that RPI the rest of the year. So pretty much have to win out if they want to hang in competition there for a top 8 seed, and might need some help from the teams above them to drop some points there.
Yeah, definitely. And now at 15, we have UC Irvine staying in that spot after going 4-0, won a midweek versus UCLA, and then went to Long Beach State and got the sweep there. Good week overall, got the job done against lesser teams and looked dominant over the weekend, so checked all the boxes, just wasn't amazing opponents. UCLA in a standard year would look like a pretty solid win there, but this year they are just terrible, so yeah, can't really say much more, staying in that same spot. Not really much room to move up, but UC Irvine's still proving that they're one of the best mid-majors out there.
Yeah, good to see them get back on track with a 4-0 week. They're looking solid here. Another team potentially on the fringe of hosting. It's probably between them and Santa Barbara for one of those West Coast hosting spots. A couple teams on the fringe there, Arizona as well. They're certainly not all going to get one, so it'll be interesting to see how things shape out to end this year and see who ends up solidifying that.
Yeah, they'll all probably be bunched in the same regional, so you know how it goes with the West Coast. But after that, we have Mississippi State at 16, dropping back 5 spots, which may be a little harsh considering they lost to Arkansas over the past week, and it was a super competitive series, and it was on the road, so tough one. They could have got the win, but you know you'll take going 1-2 against one of the best teams in the nation. Mississippi State continues to prove that they are one of the better teams in the country, even if they're losing a series like that. But it was very close, and still, yeah, I looked at that series and took a positive out of that for Mississippi State.
Yeah, I agree, and yeah, like you said, normally not a week that will have you drop in this far in the rankings, but just kind of how the cookie crumbled with how teams were being moved around ahead of them and everything, and sitting here at 16, not a bad spot. That's exactly where they are in the RPI as well. So they're moving up into hosting contention, and so if they're able to close out on a good note, they might have worked their way in there. And like you said, it's definitely a positive to see how they've played against the top teams in the SEC recently. They're very competitive and look like they belong in that top-ish group.
Yeah, we always say it's hard to win on the road. So, you know, getting just one win. We said it last week in our predictions. We believed that Arkansas was going to win the series, but Mississippi State was definitely going to scrape a game off them, and they did just that. So now at 17, we have Dallas Baptist moving up 1 spot from last week after going 4-0, winning the midweek, and then sweeping Liberty on the weekend. Good week overall against teams that they should be beating. So good for them to get the sweep, get all those wins there. Some of them were a little closer than maybe they should have been, especially considering Dallas Baptist is, you know, a team that we've had in the rankings for a lot of the year, and other polls maybe haven't. They've dropped them out and brought them back in and dropped them out and whatever, but this Dallas Baptist team, their overall record is very good, and they're getting the job done against bad teams, even if it maybe is a little bit sloppy and closer than it should be.
Yeah, you know, they had a tough stretch there, 3 straight series losses, but you look at the overall resume and it's really solid. 8-2 in Q1 games. The RPI is at 21, so still in hosting contention as well. They've played well against top teams for the most part. Just hit that one little spell, and I think this could potentially be one of those classic cases of the hot, cold, hot. This is a team that really has the talent and potential to be an Omaha team, and I think they're starting to play well at the right time and might be clicking to as we head into postseason.
Yep, and next up we have another mid-major, UC Santa Barbara at 18, moving up 1 spot as well. Might have a few teams now just jumping up 1 spot from the past week, but UCSB 4-0, won their midweek, and then was at Cal State Bakersfield, got the sweep there, got the job done. Similar to Dallas Baptist against teams that they should be beating, and they needed the sweep to keep the RPI in check, but it still went down after going 4-0, so typical, but got the job done, can't really say much more.
Yeah, just a solid week, taking care of business. One of those West Coast teams on the fringe of hosting, like I mentioned earlier, so need to close things out on a positive note. We know how the losses can really hurt you as a West Coast team this year, so just a team that really needs to take care of business as they close out the season.
Yep, and now following them up 1 spot is Oregon after going 2-1 at Washington the past week. pretty good week on the road. Would have been nice to see a sweep against one of the worst teams in the conference, but unfortunately lost that first game, so that was never on the books. But, bounced back, got those next 2 wins, and, looked the part. Their offense looked pretty decent, balance between offense and pitching. Nothing really jumping off the page, but overall, just solid performance.
Yeah, I mean this Oregon team just continues to win a lot of weekend series. 7-2 in their weekend series in the pack, which is pretty impressive. We said it's kind of a down year for the conference, but still impressive to build up that series weekend record like that. And yeah, solid week on the road. Never easy to win on the road, especially against a rival.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 20, we have Arizona also moving up 1 spot from the last week after going 3-1, winning at Arizona State in the midweek, and then going to Utah and winning that series. So good week for all road games. It's very very solid performance overall. Pretty much almost solidifying winning the conference title. They need 1 win against Oregon State the next week at home. So it's very very possible that Oregon State is able to sweep them. But this Arizona pitching staff has shown that they are one of the best, definitely the best in the Pac-12 and one of the best in the country, especially with how how bad it is for pitching at their home ballpark, and for them to have very low ERAs in that ballpark. It's just a testament to how well the pitching staff has done the entire year.
Yeah, this is a team that has just continued to play well the second half of the year. Crazy for them to be in this position with how the start of the year went for them, but they're playing extremely well, playing well against these top teams in the pack. And so it'll be interesting to see how they finish out with this series against Oregon State. If they win that, they're really in position to potentially host. If not, they fall out of that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 21, we have Alabama moving up 3 spots from the past week after going 3-1, going to what was ranked Troy in the midweek, getting that win, and then winning the series versus LSU. Very, very solid results all around. I thought Alabama was going to lose that series to LSU. I just had a hunch that LSU was going to get things going. They have yet to do that. We'll see if they make the tournament. They might just get the good old. They were national champions last year, so they get the draw of coming back to the tournament, even if they don't really deserve it. But we'll have to see there. Alabama, just showed up and won a lot of tough, close games, and just looked like the better team for the most part. And going 3-1 against good competition the entire week is nothing to look past.
Yeah, it seemed like after that series win over A&M that LSU might be on that track of just being one of those mediocre SEC teams that heats up at the end and just runs their way through the postseason. But Alabama put a stop to it. Very impressive series win. This Alabama team doesn't have the best record in conference play, but they do have some solid series wins. And, this was an impressive one, even though LSU also doesn't have the best record. So good to handle business and take care of the series at home and pick up that midweek over a Troy team that was playing extremely well.
For sure. And now at 22, we have Indiana State staying in the same spot after having pretty good back-to-back weeks. There just wasn't really any room to move up, especially against the competition they faced this past week. They went 2-1 versus Evansville. So good week, but the series was very tight. Could have gone either way. Would have liked to see them deal with it a little better, but I don't know how Indiana State has figured it out again with their RPI, but this past 2 years, the coaching staff just knows what they're doing with scheduling opponents and to be in contention for a top 8 national seed. And hosting is pretty crazy for Indiana State, and they've done this back-to-back years now.
Yeah, it is impressive. I think just like a week or two ago, we were saying they were 1-0 in Q1 games, that they really hadn't played that many. Suddenly, they're 3-6. I'm not sure who moved into the Q1 range, but it doesn't look too impressive. But somehow they're up there in the RPI and just continue to pull that off. So super impressive and solid series win here. But nothing to get too excited about. Is just taking care of business.
Yeah, for sure. And now at 23, we have Oklahoma going up 2 spots from the last week after sweeping Baylor. Good week overall. Baylor is not one of the better teams in the conference, but was able to clinch the conference title in dominant fashion over the weekend. Oklahoma just pretty much ran through the entire Big 12. Really impressive results. They're not playing in conference this next week, but it doesn't even matter. They've already clinched it. So, really impressed by Oklahoma overall and the work that they were able to put in, especially in conference.
Yeah, it is extremely impressive. 21-6 at this point is just a crazy resume point, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, they played fairly well throughout conference play, but these last couple weeks they've just really heated up, and they're getting those sweeps, and that's what really counts. Those 2-1 weeks, your overall resume is going to be solid, but nothing spectacular. But when you add those sweeps in, it just makes the record look that much nicer, and that's what they have at this point. And so, yeah, super impressive resume at the end of the year now.
Yep, and now at 24, we have South Carolina dropping back 11 spots from last week, so pretty big fall. They went 1-3, won their midweek, but then got swept at home by Georgia. We saw Georgia jump up the rankings a bunch, and now the opposite for South Carolina, almost falling out. A really tough week at home. They just could not compete at all with that Georgia offense. They were just getting out hit. Even if they were winning games at some point, Georgia just came back with a fire and just smoked them late in the game and was able to just dominate them in whatever inning they needed to get the lead back. So South Carolina, unfortunate. They have a few good series wins, but nothing spectacular. They lost to Alabama. That's why they're behind them now. But yeah, South Carolina still should be in a good spot come regionals.
Yeah, I think this team's in a really interesting position right now because they're only at 13 conference wins, which usually in the SEC is a good mark, and that goes well for you. But they're on the road at Tennessee this weekend. Certainly a spot they could get swept. And, if you have back to back weekends getting swept, if they don't do well in the SEC tournament, you might see them just miss the tournament altogether, which would be crazy because their RPI is 19 right now. They've been a top 25 team for a long time. But then on the flip side, if they win that series at Tennessee, they're probably hosting. So there's just a lot up in the air this weekend against Tennessee, and we could really see this team season go in very different directions.
Yeah, definitely could be a team to keep an eye out for. I feel like they'll be able to pick up a game off Tennessee, just have a hunch, but we'll have to see there. And now finishing our top 25, rounding it out, we have Texas jumping into the rankings. Maybe they should have been in last week, but there just wasn't an open spot for them to come in. They have looked really, really solid in conference recently. This past week going 2-1 at UCF. Another impressive week. They just continue to win conference series. And they've only lost one conference series. It was to maybe the worst team in conference with BYU, but every other series they've been able to win, which is impressive nonetheless. And so deserving of jumping into the rankings this week.
Yeah, this is honestly just a really confusing team. They have some good series wins. They've built up a solid Big 12 resume. Like you said, then you look at the overall record and everything. 13-8 in Q4 games just is bewildering to me that they're playing that poorly against bottom feeder teams. But they've had those good series as well. I mean, like we said, they dropped that series to BYU, who's the worst team in the conference. So that was a tough one there and definitely part of that record. But yeah, I mean they're playing well to end the year, and that's what really matters here. And we'll see if they're able to continue that through the last weekend and the conference tourney.
Yep, definitely. And the team that dropped out of our top 25 this past week was Troy. Right after they come in, they go 1-3, losing to Alabama in the midweek, and then losing the series at Texas State, a team that looked like they could be a very, very solid team early in the year, but Texas State definitely fell off late. So a tough week after just getting into the rankings. Troy drops out. They looked like one of the hottest teams in the country, and for them to pull off a week going 1-3 is really rough. Maybe one of the tougher weeks that they faced recently, but I mean, especially with that midweek, I think the weekend series may have been a bit easier, but still not getting that job done whatsoever. And they let it slip. It was a pretty close series on the road, but still got to come up with the wins somewhere.
Yeah, just brutal after pulling off some really impressive series wins. You thought they'd keep that clicking. maybe not stay as hot as they were, but didn't think it'd be this bad of a week. And, just thought they'd play a little better this week against, decent competition and that midweek against Bama.
Yeah, for sure. And now a few teams right outside the top 25. There are a lot that maybe should have jumped in. There just weren't any teams at the back of the rankings that had bad weeks. There were a lot of teams in the middle of the rankings that had bad weeks, but not enough to drop them fully out. So we have San Diego, Louisiana, and Oklahoma State, all teams that I think could have jumped into the rankings if things had just panned out a little differently. I think UNCW, also a team that has been on the outside looking in for a while, just waiting for an opportunity to jump back in.
Yeah, those are all teams right around that mark. The one other I will keep mentioning is Georgia Tech. They have some good competition to end the year, and they just won the series against Duke. Dropped that midweek to Auburn, who has an incredible resume against non-conference opponents. So not a surprise to see them drop it. Auburn smashes anyone they're playing that's not in the SEC. So, but Georgia Tech has played fairly well to close out the year, and they have a huge series at Florida State to end the season. So I think if they pick that up, there's a good chance you could see them jump in unless they drop that midweek to Mercer, which wouldn't surprise anyone. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, we'll see it happens. There's a lot of teams right on the outside looking in, so definitely room to jump in there. But be sure to keep an eye out later in the week for our weekend series predictions, where we take 5 of the top series. There are a lot of very, very solid games coming up, rivalry games, and also just top teams playing off against each other. So we'll see what happens there, but be sure to pay attention for that video coming out shortly. Peace.